we'll pull through, and we are well. We are thankful.
Well, thank you very much. Now getting back to businesses, here we talk about raising voices. My colleague in studios here, Ruben Impima, just before he moved out of studios, he had the concern over what these raising voices are. Does it mean shouting high? What are raising voices? Yeah,
partly that, but the question is, what are we shouting for?
Okay.
So at Raising Voices, our name speaks exactly what we do. We raise the voices of women and children. And that is what we were set up for. We were set up 20 years ago.
Okay.
Actually, last year we should have been celebrating our 20 years, but because of the lockdown and all that, we didn't really come to a point where we wanted to celebrate.
Okay.
With everybody, with all our partners, our well-wishers, the children we've worked with for all these years, the women. So we kept postponing it. But Raising Voices basically is an advocacy organization that aims at fighting for the rights of women who are violated and children who are violated. For children, we specifically target children in schools, and we were focusing on violence in schools. As you know, you and I, we grew up on Chiboko. I was not very good at mathematics growing up, and I got enough canes for that because there was always mental math. And we had 5 numbers each morning. Unfortunately, if you got below 3, you got the number of canes based on the number of numbers that you failed.
That you failed, yes.
Yeah. So that is what we have been doing. We work in over 20 districts all over the country. Of course, they've been subdivided and divided over time. Our latest count is at around 30 districts all over the country. We work with local organizations who have a similar vision like us. We don't work alone, and we also reach out to schools. We work with district education offices in all the districts that we work with. And we make sure that they also raise the voices of the children and their concerns the same way we do.
Okay. So what was your inspiration 20 years ago to start what you call Raising Voices?
So, as you know, our cultures tend to suppress especially women and children. And our social norms do not allow women to freely express themselves as they ought to, because of the patriarchy, as you're saying. And quite a number of them, you know, have gone through tough times. They've been violated physically, emotionally, sexually, and so on. And so we began to work around that. And we were informed by studies at that time, which still go on even up to now. We do a lot of research to inform our work. We don't just, you know, simply work, but we are informed. We have empirical data that shows us that either the situation is getting better or worsening. We had gained a lot. I have to say that the pandemic has really taken us back. Some of the gains that we had achieved, we have kind of lost them. But we believe that we'll pick up ourselves again, because once you build the awareness in communities, among the women, among the children, among the teachers, and with the backup of Minister of Education, Minister of Health, Minister of Gender, somehow you already have set the ball rolling, so you don't go back to zero totally. Yeah, and that is what informed us, but we're also seeing children running out from, you know, leaving schools, dropping out of school because they are too harassed, they feel uncomfortable, especially for young girls, you know, as they get into their menstruation and all that, it becomes uncomfortable. And when they're absent from school, the teachers don't understand that. So the teachers were the source of harshness, and they were not creating a conducive learning environment. So Raising Voices came in, and we developed toolkits. We have a toolkit we call the Good School Toolkit. That is a toolkit that we have been promoting, but also trained so many teachers around and schools. When we go to a school, we identify those we call teacher protagonists. Those are the teachers that are enthusiastic, have been chosen, and are willing to actually take on this approach. Then they reach out to the students, but we go beyond the school. We also go to the communities, because we know that to change the norms, we need to also go to communities. We also work with faith-based leaders. We don't only work with schools.
Okay. Now, because you put a lot of emphasis on the prevention of violence against women and children, how or what will it take? I just want to know what it will take to, or what it takes to prevent violence against women and children.
It's an attitudinal change, first of all, a behavior change. And we know that our socialization process, everything you and I know, we picked from our homes. So the home is a big setting and the first point where you learn everything, good or bad. So once we change the way we groom our children, once we change the way our teachers taught us, because besides the home, the next place where you and I acquired what we know was in school. In fact, some of us who went to boarding school spent more time in school than at home. So our teachers shaped and formed us. They shaped our values, our beliefs, our principles. So basically, that is what it takes to change the attitude, the thinking, the perspective of how you think women are. Do you regard them as valuable? Do you think children have a right to speak? Do you think they have a right to express themselves? Do you think they have needs? Yeah, and can they express their needs in a manner that you can listen to them? Are you even willing to listen to them? Yeah, so I think it really takes attitudinal change. Yes, you also need to have some knowledge and some skills, but most of all, it is attitude. Once we change our attitude, we create a huge platform to allow those who can't speak to speak out.
Okay. There's also another very common phrase and adage amongst yourselves, which is called SASA.
Yes.
How does that work? What is it? And how effective has it been?
So SASA is the other toolkit that we also developed to fight violence against women. So on the violence against children prevention, we were using the Good School Toolkit. That was focusing on schools and communities. On the side of women, that we were using the toolkit we call SASA. SASA is just an abbreviation. And in fact, we have improved it now. 2019, I believe, we began to modify it based on the feedback that we were getting. And we added on another word on it. So we now call it SASA together. Yeah. So this toolkit takes about 3 years. It's a whole training, attitudinal, behavior change process that enables groups of women, groups of men, anybody young or old who are allowed to participate in this program to go through it for at least a period of 3 years, because we know you don't just change attitudes today. You don't find me beating my child and tell me stop beating my child and you think that will happen. You have to explain to me why. What is the effect? What is the impact? And so how can what is the alternative? This is how I'm used to disciplining my child. So what is the alternative? This is how I'm used to talking to my wife or my husband. So what is the alternative? And what will be the gains or the losses out of that? So it is a process. And so we've used SASA over the years as well. And we have evidence that it actually works, that communities can change, that individuals can change, women and men can live peacefully after they have gone through this process. And usually when they go through this process, we now challenge them to pass on the message to others. And that's when we call them activists. They become activists, because then they become the mouthpiece of what has changed in their lives, and then they help that happen to the next couple and to the next couple.
We grew in societies where we had a common phrase or adage that says an African child is raised by an entire village. It's not your sole responsibility to raise and bring up these children. The advocacy that you're doing now, the activism that you're doing now, seems like it's eroding the African culture, and this is what most people out there say. We were brought up the hard way, and maybe that's why we actually where we are today. Today, you're making it a taboo for me and you to discipline and to maybe cause discipline into our children. And the emancipation that we've seen, especially with the women movement, people tend to think it's actually one of the biggest causes that has ignited the violences that we have in our homes and in our societies. Don't you think they are right when they allege so?
No, they are not right. They are obviously not right. And we know that even in our history, there were powerful women. We had women who were leaders. We had women who ruled. Yeah. If you go, for instance, among the Nyamwezi, they had actually a lady who was a queen who ruled. We had matrilineal societies. So it is not true that the emancipation of women has caused indiscipline among women. But let me take you back a little bit. There's a saying that says violence breeds violence. yeah, that if you use violence, you will also instigate the next people to also focus, also violate you at some point. So in order to break that cycle, because it is a cycle, like I said, it is part of our socialization. If you raise me up, beating me, pinching me, or doing all sorts of, things to me and inflicting pain on me, what do you think will happen when I grow up? I will do exactly what I know best. That is to inflict pain on the next people. My children will do the same. But what does that do to us psychologically? Actually, there are studies that are now beginning to show that because of this violence that we have allowed to grow in families in the name of discipline, it is actually also causing mental health problems among some children. And then you know that mental health is one of the challenges we face that we are not prepared to actually deal with. First of all, we have very few mental health facilities. Secondly, we have a very negative attitude around the stigma. The moment you say, I have someone in my family who has a mental health problem, everyone is like, Bamuroga. We think in terms of witchcraft rather than in actually solving a problem. And once we do that, we go on the other side where we totally go off course. So I don't believe that women's emancipation has caused indiscipline or has caused, women to riot, but it has actually brought more harmony and more equality. When women speak up and when women are given the opportunity to actually also utilize the resources they have, the wisdom, the knowledge, the energy, the skills that they have, we become a better society. Because we are fully utilizing all the resources that we have, rather than depending on one gender to deliver. Now you're harnessing together all the resources that you can get, both mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, from all the gender. So actually we are becoming a better society than we were. If you look, for instance, at our lifespan, there's a time when they were saying, women live longer than men.
Sure.
And actually HIV/AIDS took more men than women, out of our society. So what do you think would have happened if women were not empowered to take care of their children, to get into school? Because if you remember, there was the affirmative action that allowed many young girls, I was one of the beneficiaries of that, to get into the affirmative action, to get into university. So if we hadn't got into university, how would we have taken care of our families? It means we would have continued to wallow in poverty. But now, you know for sure that if you educate a girl and educate a boy, chances are that both of them will be able to take care of themselves, but also you know that you are breeding equality in society, and you're then bringing in other resources that women have that would never have come on the table. For instance, there are certain endowments we have as women. The power of persuasion is really great among women. The power of negotiation is really great among women. Studies are showing that. The power of resilience. Women are very, very, very resilient because they face so many things, but then they keep going.
Okay. And how about those who think that when you empower the women, then you get to a level of dwarfing the men in the future, that you'll have a society that is again not balanced, because we'll have women who are very now superior and having an inferior breed of the men within.
Again, that is not true.
It's also not true.
It is totally not true. In fact, it is just a fear
by the men.
By the men, unfortunately. But when you look at all the organizations that are involved in gender equality and promoting the girl child, they're actually not demeaning the boy child at the same time. I'm a mother, I have a son. I'm concerned about how my son is going to face society. How is my son going to look like? I don't want my son to be the one who is beating his wife in future. I want my son to see how I have raised him and then be able to promote the same behavior. I think it is just a feeling that men have, where they think that probably we are becoming more powerful, but that is not what we are after. We are after equality. We are after attaining our rights and being given the rightful place that we deserve as women in society. And for us to earn a living just like any other human being. So it is our human right. Just like the man has rights, the woman has rights. We just want to have our rights to be able to live a life of dignity and not one above the other. So not power over, but power together. Let's work together. So I think it's just a mentality that men have, that we are dwarfing them. But that's not our agenda whatsoever. It has never been, never will be. We are looking at equality, and that's what we continue to promote.
Okay, very important. So how are you managing during the COVID-19 pandemic? Because it's a challenge to everybody, and I would love to know how Raising Voices is managing through the pandemic of COVID-19.
Yeah, this second wave was really tough.
It's torturing all of us.
It tortured everybody. The first one, we didn't really feel it that bad. But this one hit everybody. Our staff were down. Either they were sick themselves, they contracted COVID, or they were nursing their siblings, their children, or their parents who even passed away for some of them. So it's really been a sad affair. And for us as an organization, we really felt that this was the time to focus on saving lives, mostly. Because it's almost impossible to get somebody to focus on their work when emotionally and psychologically you know, they are sick and they are affected. Maybe they've just lost a beloved one. So we had to change our approach of work. We reduced our work time from the full 8 hours to about 5 hours. Actually, at one point where it was really so bad, around June was really the peak of where, you know, the COVID rates were going high, and we were facing the same also in the organization. So we decided that we are going to take 2 weeks off for everybody, just to simply settle down, focus on saving yourself and your neighbor and your family.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you feel as Raising Voices seeing women and children now on the streets, sleeping on the streets, begging on the streets, even in the pandemic where you do not expect people in towns, many streets in town are actually empty, but you see women begging on the streets and doing everything. How do you feel as Raising Voices seeing all these, especially street children, roaming from one end to the other end of our streets in Kampala, even when there is nobody to beg from?
It's very disheartening, and that shows you what poverty does. Poverty erodes the dignity of a human being, and it is so sad that that is happening, and they are exposing themselves more to the risk of COVID when they shouldn't. That tells you there's something wrong with our systems, you know, our society, that when we lock down like this, those who don't have get into a worse off situation than they were before. And I know that the government is putting in every effort to try as much as possible to reach those who really can't fend for themselves at this point in time. But it is not sustainable. And secondly, it is hard. It is really hard to reach every single person. First of all, it's damn expensive. And by the time you're going around to reach everybody, probably we will have lost some of those people. So it's really sad, and it's because most NGOs are not really working at full capacity. They also can't reach out because movement is now curtailed. So it's really tough. It's so hard. What we are trying to do, some of us, is just on a personal basis, you know, to check out on your neighbor, check out on a few colleagues, try and put some food together, put some clothes together. So we are trying to go, you know, working informally.
Okay.
We are trying to work informally and help, so that if you have 5 matoke, look around for who needs an extra matoke. If you have some little money, share that with your colleague, because what do you gain if you have plenty and others don't have at all? Yeah, but there has to be a way in which this problem is addressed. Okay. And the only person we can turn to is the government, to ask the government to reach out to these women, reach out to these children, and save their lives. We really need to move into an emergency mode. This is not life as usual anymore. It's not business as usual anymore. We need to switch into an emergency mode to save their lives.
Okay. How progressive were you, before you take a break, how progressive were you before the pandemic broke out? Because now we have the pandemic, which is of course challenging all of us. It's challenging government, it's challenging all of us at individual level, community level, and family level. But how progressive were you before, pre-COVID-19?
We were doing well. I'll just give you an example. We had just launched a campaign to roll out and scale our work, our Good School Toolkit, to 5,000 schools all over the country. The Good School Study? Yes. We had just launched that. And as we were beginning to distribute the materials to different districts, the lockdown happened. So everything came to a standstill. Yeah, that means that you know, we can't do much. The schools are closed themselves, so even if we wanted to do work in schools, we can't. And when schools open, they're going to be on a crash program, so that means we are really going to be slowing down, and it's going to set us back in many ways. Okay. So that means our campaign has been affected. But we also are running another campaign on the media. Okay. That too was affected. Yeah, we still can't bring people in studio as we wanted to, because they can't move as freely as they ought to be moving. So a lot of our work has really been curtailed. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Madam Mugisha, we'll take a break and return. When we come back, we'll continue to talk about quite a number of issues that you need to address us on in as far as raising voices is concerned. We'll take a break and return shortly.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra. Pick of the day on UBC, brought to you by was brought to you by.
We've cut and reduced our MTN Momo withdrawal rates. Now you can withdraw mobile money at the lowest rates. You also get MTN Central Points when you deposit, send, and withdraw MTN mobile money. Visit our Momo agents countrywide and withdraw mobile money at our reduced rates from 1st May 2021. Everywhere you go, MTN.
Echa COVID-19 chijja kugwa. If we get vaccinated now, observe social distancing, wear masks properly, sanitize or wash our hands with soap and water regularly. Together we can defeat this enemy.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from the break. My name is Jagenda Semakola Ziksoka on Good Morning Uganda Extra. And of course, with me in studios is Mrs. Delphine Mugisha, the country director for Raising Voices. And of course, talking about the shadow pandemic and raising voices and what we think needs to be done just right there. Madam Mugisha, welcome back from the break. And of course, we continue. You had just spoken to us about the Good School Study. And let's pick it up from here. When we talk about the Good School Study toolkit, when I was growing up, I went to a school where we did community work, where we did, where we could do lots of things that children do not do in schools now. You know, when you come late, there was a punishment for coming late. You could either pick rubbish in the compound, you could either slash or wash the toilets and all the things. What does your school, your Good School Study toolkit here address? Does it condemn me being punished for coming late in school, for not doing my assignments or doing all the things? Let's understand what it is, or it's just promoting rights, that I, as a child, have a right possibly to even come late in school.
I think the word you've used, condemned, is really strong. Yeah, there's always, of course, there are ways of disciplining. I would prefer to use the word disciplining than condemning. Yeah, so the Good School Toolkit promotes alternative ways of disciplining. Instead of inflicting pain, in other words, physically beating the child, we look at other ways in which you can have a dialogue with the child. Yeah. Instead of inflicting pain. But standing in the corner alone psychologically tortures them, in the sense that next time they won't want to do it, because instead of sitting down while others are in class, that one has been made to stand up. It's not comfortable. So that discomfort makes that child not want to do it again. You know what happened? when we started, when teachers were making us dig, you know, you spend a whole day digging because you came late or because you failed an exam or something like that. Do you know why people, you and I are running away from agriculture now?
It was a punishment.
It was because psychologically we view it as a bad thing.
It wasn't a career.
Yeah, it was not something that we felt was
Take
good.
pride in.
Yeah, so we started hating agriculture. We started doing anything to do with the soil. And when we grew up, we all wanted to rush to the city, yeah, because you're running away from the home. Now, when the government is saying agriculture is the biggest sector, the highest earning economy sector for our economy, and they're asking us to all go back, guess what? The reluctance for us to go back is because in our minds, it is a bad thing, yeah? So we will have to kind of undo that. And if we are going to undo that, we better start with the schools. We better introduce alternative forms of disciplining, which do not psychologically or physically or emotionally torture the child, but get the child to understand and do it differently. The other ways that the school, the Good School Toolkit promotes is to bring the other children on board. Actually, for the other children to also discuss the matter. So and so, you know, beat another colleague, what do we do about it? So when children participate in that and decide the form of punishment, yeah, which usually is not, again, a physical one or a pain-inflicting one, then the children begin to realize that, you know, we shouldn't be in the same category as this person. Then the other is to promote other ways, like, for instance, uploading the well-behaved child, or one who has now moved from one level to another, then rewarding them, awarding them, recognizing them, yeah, having those heroes boards in school so that they can see and know that good behavior is rewarded. Okay. But in our cases, whether you were good, whether you were bad, didn't make a difference. You were all the same. Yeah. So I think it is important to give children an incentive to do better, an incentive to behave better. Once they know that there is a reward for me to behave well, then they will continue in that direction. Okay. But once they know that it doesn't matter, you know, and it doesn't make any difference, then they won't care.
In your earlier submission, you alluded or talked about attitudinal change, but there are two overriding variables here. We have culture and you also have religion. We're now having hesitancies in fighting the pandemic of COVID-19, talking about vaccines, for example, but you also have these issues over my culture and my religion. I want to know how you raising voices harmonize this, because whatever you do will not run away from culture and will not run away from the religions that we have. How are you marrying these two in your campaign of raising voices?
So our cultures are not necessarily bad. Okay. There are some good things in our culture. You know, things around respect your elders. There was a reason why, yeah? Share the little that you have. There was a reason why. You know, greet your neighbor. Those are good things. So our culture is not necessarily bad, but then there are some things in our culture that do not promote a positive behavior. Those are the ones we challenge, that we interrogate, and the ones where we say, can we find an alternative? I'll give you an example. For instance, our olden cultures promoted early marriage. You know, once a girl got breasts between 12 to 13 years, oh, this one is ready for marriage, yeah? Now, in those days, that was the way they were doing things.
And it seemed okay.
And it seemed okay. But now we know that there are heavy consequences when a child gets married at the age of 13. First of all, biologically, they are not ready. Their body is not ready for reproduction. Mentally, psychologically, they are not yet ready to cope with the rigors of marriage. But then you're also like breaking their future completely, yeah? You know the rigors of marriage, especially when you're married in the village. You know, you get into digging, taking care of the children and stuff like that. So that means the child will drop out of school. Yeah. So the other alternatives the child would have had to actually get out of poverty, you instead perpetuate a cycle of poverty, because the child doesn't have the opportunities that would allow her later on to express herself. She doesn't have that capacity. She's not able to stay long enough in school to grow emotionally, physically, and make her own choices, or make his own choices. So the power of making choices is also informed by how exposed you are and how knowledgeable you are. If your worldview is so narrow, that is the basis upon which you will make a decision. So our cultures were not necessarily bad, but they had certain habits that were really not good for children, like early marriage. I gave an example. There's another one, female genital mutilation,
FGM.
which is practiced in some of our cultures here in Uganda. When you look at the impact health-wise that does to a young girl, really you wouldn't want to say that is a good thing. Yeah? And so those are some of the things where we work not only, like I said, not only with schools, but we know that to change social norms, you have to reach out to the custodians of social norms. And the custodians are cultural leaders, religious leaders. They play a big, big role. When you talk to most women, even before they go to a counselor, a trained counselor, even before they go to police, most likely they've first gone to a religious leader or gone to a cultural leader.
And these hesitant to your campaign?
Yes, they are, but we involve them. We have to sensitize them. We have to help them realize that the power they have needs to be used differently and used positively. Yeah, because they listen to them. They listen a lot to them, especially the women. They go to them, they seek counsel, they seek advice, and so on. So if you do not work with them, then you really cannot succeed. So we bring them on board. Usually they are part of the parents' boards in schools. In our SASA, we reach out to them. They become part of our activists. They are those, first of all, who need change in their own homes. Remember that they are also not, they are also suffering the same challenges as everyone else is suffering. Even if they are religious leaders and cultural leaders, it doesn't mean that they have peaceful homes. Yeah. So the change has to begin with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
SASA sounds like Kiswahili for now. Is that what it means?
No, no, no. It's an abbreviation.
It's an abbreviation.
It's an abbreviation.
It's an acronym.
It's an acronym. It has, SASA was built on phases. Okay. So it has a start phase, which is S.
Which is S.
Then it has awareness, where we build the awareness. So we went using the acronyms based on those sessions to create the word SASA. So many times people think maybe it is...
SASA Kiswahili?
No, no, no. Okay. Not SASA of Kiswahili. Then there is the action. So that is the last one where we are talking about now you're ready to move. You're ready to move and act.
Okay. Yeah. Very important. What government institutions or departments are you working with? Because I know that Raising Voices is not a government agency.
Yes.
But you are here to talk about issues of the women and issues of children. So what government agencies are you closely working with in this collaboration of your campaign of Raising Voices?
We work with probation officers in all the districts where we work. We work with all the DEOs, definitely, without a doubt. We work with all the gender officers there. As you know, as an NGO, you cannot just enter a district and start working without, first of all, introducing yourself to the cow. The cow needs to know who you are. The LC5 needs to know who you are, what you're doing, what extent, which villages, which sub-counties are you going to work with, and so on. So we go through the formal introductions like any other non-profit organization. And we work very closely with those. We go to the religious institutions. You know, there are some communities which may be predominantly Muslim or predominantly Catholic or Protestant or so on. We reach out to those. We reach out to the cultural leaders. So we don't work alone. Okay. And then at the high level, we work with the Ministry of Gender. We have specific focal point persons we work with. We work with the commissioners. Yeah. In Ministry of Education, we work with the Commissioner of Primary Education, Higher Education. And then in Ministry of Health, we also work with the same focal point persons.
Where is gender? Because gender has the women and the children in this country. Are you working with them?
Oh yeah, we are working with Ministry of Gender very, very actively. Okay. We are working with Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very important. Now, during this the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a high rise of cases of violence, and domestic violence basically, and issues of child marriages and stuff like that. And I just want to know how you've been responding to this, even amidst the pandemic, because when you can't move, violence does not stop. No. When you can't move, early pregnancies don't stop. No. When you can't move, child marriages are not stopping, and we've actually seen an increase in them. How are you managing the situation as Raising Voices?
Yeah, and even if we were able to move, we wouldn't be able to stop them in the homes, because we can't enter the homes and know what's going on in the homes.
Exactly.
Yeah, but like I said, we have continued working with our focal point persons.
Sure. Whatever they are.
We have the activists, the protagonists, who we call the regional resource persons. These regional resource persons, the ones I was describing to you and telling you that are the ones we've given tablets, so they are able to reach out and train, but also gather data. They are really, really critical. When a child is violated and either a parent or a neighbor or somebody whistleblowers and comes to this regional resource person, the regional resource person has a wide range of resources depending on the magnitude of the issue. Sometimes the regional resource person knows that I can't handle this, it is a police case. So he will immediately refer them to the police, and might even facilitate them, and give them some bit of support. Here is some transport, maybe here is a border. Please rush very quickly, go to the police. Meanwhile, he's also coordinating with the family desk person on the other side in the police, informing them that we have sent to you this child from this area has been violated like this, please attend to them. Okay. So we work very closely with the LC system. We work very closely with the family desk, the police focal point persons. We work very closely with the religious and cultural leaders.
What are some of these pertinent lessons that you've learned in this pandemic? Because we do not know when it will actually end. Yeah. What about if it doesn't end in the next 3 years? How do you plan to rebuild? How do you plan to go on, even with the disruptions of the pandemic? What lessons have you learned, and how do you plan to get on and continue sailing and not stop your activities?
I think the most important thing is the health of our families. Parents have a critical role to play in the life and sustenance of their children. Not just providing food, but actually making sure that the children stay motivated, they are positive, they are energetic, they are engaged, they are not redundant. So really the first lesson we have picked is to target parents. Parents to be the source of change. Parents to play the teacher role. Parents to play the role of making sure that the child is healthy, is mentally okay, and to equip parents with that wisdom through social media, for those who can afford phones, through radio programs, and to make sure that the parent is motivated, stimulated, and positively engaged so that they can be able to engage their child. Because where the teacher can't reach, it is the parent really who can reach there. So if the parent is not really helping the child to have hope for tomorrow, the parent herself or himself is hopeless, the child will get depressed, because the child will see that the parent is gone. Yeah, the parent is depressed, the child will also get depressed. So we are appealing to parents to really keep themselves going, motivate themselves, find ways of motivating one another wherever they are, because the children are looking up to them. And for them to get their children not to be redundant, but engage them in learning a new skill. What opportunities can they use during this time? What new skill can they do? Is it knitting? Is it cooking? Is it cultivating? Is it gardening? What is it? I think we need to engage our children so that their minds stay absorbed, but they also feel like they are gaining a new skill. Yeah. So parents have that big role. And then the parents need to constantly motivate the children that this is not the end of the world. Yeah. This is not the end of the world. COVID will end and there will be life after that. But how shall we look like when COVID ends? Yeah. What skill will we have learned? Yeah. So parents have to really make sure that they are supporting their children, but also parents need to have a support system themselves. Which means that parents need to look out for other parents and look out for the resources that they need. And now there are plenty of resources if you really want to look out. For instance, Wukede is distributing some resources. If you listen keenly on radio programs, churches, mosques, and individuals are now talking about how parents can engage their children so that their children stay engaged, and we all stay hopeful. Okay. The other thing is also prevention of COVID. Children now want to go to the next neighbor and play. But you don't know how that family is and what they are going through. So the child could also end up risking themselves, but also risking the rest of the family. So parents have to also continuously remind the child and help them understand what COVID is like, how it is transmitted, and how it can be prevented. Okay. Do you have any specific message to the fathers, we the fathers, as opposed to banding us together as parents, meaning me and my wife, but do you have a specific message to the fathers as raising voices in this campaign of ending violence against women and children? I think the men need to desist strongly from being the perpetuators of pain and violence, because the Bible reminds us that you reap what you sow. if you're violent as a man, if you're harsh, if you're rude, if you're terrible, if you're really a menace in the home, be sure that the guns will be turned on you one day. So I think it is in the interest of men to be the sources of peace, to be the sources of non-violence, because in so doing, they will also not only be creating a well-being for themselves, but for everyone else around them. So I think in our culture, and we still hold them as custodians of many things, men need to rethink their values. Violence, pain does not yield necessarily positive results. So they need to rethink their strategies, they need to rethink their approaches, they need to engage in dialogue, yeah? They need to engage in being challenged, yeah? And learning to share the power that they have. Gone are the days of power over. You don't come to your home and start talking to them like as if everyone else from the wife downwards are small children or are your property. No, they have a right to speak, to question, and understand how you're leading the family. So it is now shared leadership. Men should learn to share leadership in the family. Men need to embrace shared visions together. And in so doing, they will gain more because the burden of care, which lies squarely on their shoulders, will be lessened because it will be shared across the family. Yeah. So I think men need to look at the good that is in there, in sharing power, in sharing leadership, and in sharing vision, because it's for the betterment and sustenance of the family.
Okay. Is the available current legal regime commendable to fight against these vices that we talked about?
You mean the
laws that we have?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. We've come a long way. We don't have everything we need, but definitely we've come a long way, and this government has been supportive. They've had cold feet on a few things, on some of the bills, like the co-ownership elements. They've been very, the domestic relations bill, they've been hesitant, and we know why. Again, it is patriarchy at play. But in a larger sense, there's been a lot of positive support. But there's one thing to have the policy, there's another to actually implement it and see results. Yeah. So what Uganda is good at is having good policies. The challenge we have is implementing these policies and having all the resources that are required to make sure that we realize the good out of these policies. So we are not short of policies. Okay. The challenge we have is implementing and adherence and making sure that justice is sought.
And how would you advise government to implement these, as opposed to doing them and shelving them there with their very good niceties in them?
It's a matter of prioritizing. The government needs to put its mouth where its hand is. Okay. Yeah. So when you look at the sectors that take a bigger chunk when it comes to the budgeting in terms of percentage, it's not where the issues we are discussing lie. It's not with the Ministry of Gender, it's not, with Ministry of Education, who have the power to actually cause more long-term change. Okay. Yeah. So I think there needs to be a reprioritizing, but also there needs to be stronger political will in terms of making sure that these policies actually realize the results they were set to achieve.
Finally, government launched what they call the sexuality education framework, which I think you've interacted with in 2018. Is it a good thing? Because government is implementing slowly. It had some resistance, like I told you, from culture and of course religion. But government is actually implementing it. Do you look at it as a very good policy that is helping you in your campaign of raising voices?
It is one of the tools.
It's one of the tools.
It is one of the tools, and it's a good starting point. Of course, there was a lot of haggling back and forth until it got to the point where it was. But the government has also put in place other policies that have come in to support. For instance, the pregnancy of girls being accepted back in school. I think that is a fantastic policy. This was something unheard of, totally unheard of. But the pandemic has really helped to bring that to fruition. Sure. That now it is against the law to throw a child out of school who wants to continue school just because either they gave birth and are returning back to school or they are pregnant for some reason.
Back to school?
Yes, I think that is a fantastic policy. But also, the Ministry of Education has come up with other similar laws around the senior woman and the senior man. And that is where within the school itself now has resources and individuals who are trained, teachers who are trained to actually support the child psychologically, mentally, physically, emotionally, to deal with all the challenges of adolescence. Yeah, I think those are some of the things where we say we score the government highly in terms of having this. Now, the issue is, again, implementation and making sure, of course, all the schools now know the policy. Corporal punishment itself, for instance, is against the law, but how many schools adhere to it? So that is why I say having the policies, one, is a good thing. Enforcement is another.
Exactly.
Yeah, enforcement is where we have the biggest challenges.
In just 1 minute, a parting shot, what message specifically do you have to people out there?
I think we need to all remain hopeful. It's been tough on everybody. We need to give ourselves a bit more grace. And remain hopeful, but also reach out. I think this is time for all of us to reach out to one another and stop being selfish. Because people are hurting, people are struggling, and those of us who still have some energy, we shouldn't just be selfish. We need to reach out and be hopeful. I think this will come to an end. One day it will end. We don't know how long it will take, but we cannot afford to give up hope. We cannot afford to give up hope. It will make us wiser. There's a saying that, you know, when an opportunity comes, you either, when a challenge comes, you either choose to view it as a challenge or as an opportunity. So I think this is an opportunity for us to be better people, a better society. Well,
I can't thank you I can't thank you more, but I just want to say thank you so much for having allowed to join us on Good Morning Uganda, and of course for sharing with us your views on what needs to be done. And to the people out there, it's a clarion call for all of us to do as much as we can to end violence against children, against the women, against anybody in society. Like you said, violence breeds violence. So whichever way we go, we need to desist from violence, and of course think for the alternatives to have a harmonious and a very good society for us to live in that way. Delphine Mjisha is the country director for Raising Voices. Thank you very much for joining us on Good Morning Uganda today, and we'll stop it here. Just reminding that we'll return tomorrow with a Pan-African Friday. My name is Jage Nasemakola Ziksoka, and good morning for now. Bye-bye, and God bless you. Thank you.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Echa COVID-19 chijja kugwa. If we get vaccinated now, observe social distancing, wear masks properly, sanitize or wash our hands with soap and water